Welcome to Common Sense. Common Sense program is a series of shows that feature interviews with very interesting people. And it helps us to learn in a clear, concise, and direct way who these folks are, what they do, and what makes sense to them and what doesn't. I'm Rudy Breglia, and today I'll be interviewing the multi-talented author and knowledgeable G.B. Pool. Welcome, Gail, to Common Sense. Please start us off by telling us where you were born and what brings you to this part of Ohio.
Well, I was born in Omaha, Nebraska, but the fact my dad was in the military, we traveled a lot of places. I finally ended up in California, where I lived quite a long time, married my husband there. But when he passed away, my brother, who lives up in Port Clinton, said I should move to Ohio. So
wow.
I packed up my dog and my stuff, and we drove out here to Ohio.
Okay, so, well, welcome.
Thank you.
When did you first start to express your thoughts in writing?
When I was 12 years old, my seventh grade teacher asked us to write down 3 things that we might want to be when we grow up. I said writer, writer, and writer, because that was the only thing I wanted to do. But I ended up going to college, had a lot of jobs. My life kept changing.
Okay, well, was writing one of the ways that helped you to adapt to your changing world?
Yes. One of my dad's assignments was in Memphis, Tennessee. The boy next door and I would put on plays in my dad's carport. That was fun. Then my parents bought me some marionettes, and they built me a stage, and I would put on my marionette plays. I, of course, write the plays myself. When we would go back to Omaha to visit relatives, neighbors down the street liked to sing, and we would put up little plays in my grandmother's basement. So again, I was writing those different plays. But it is something that I always wanted to do, writing.
Okay. Well, what places did you live when your dad was in the Air Force, and what was your favorite?
Okay. The first place I remember was on the island of Okinawa. I went there when I was 5 years old. We stayed there 2.5 years. I enjoyed exploring the caves in and around our house. I was very adventurous. Then my dad was stationed in Memphis, Tennessee. He actually had 2 tours of duty in Memphis. By the second tour of duty, he decided he wanted to build a house where my mom and he could retire, so we moved out into the suburbs. I actually lived 3 blocks from Elvis Presley. I actually met him when I was 14 years old because he basically lived down the street.
Wow.
But while my dad was there that second tour of duty, whatever he was doing was very different. My dad was an officer in the Air Force and a pilot. He and a colonel would fly off different places. He would never tell us where he went, but my dad would always bring me something. One time he brought me sugar cane. He never explained that. I just filed it away in my memory and went on with my life. My dad's next tour of duty was going to be overseas, but he needed more training. And that was going to be at Chanute Air Force Base in Illinois. Well, I just started my sophomore year of high school. My dad wanted me to stay in Memphis, so Mom and I stayed there. My brother was in college at University of Michigan in Ann Arbor.
Okay.
So Dad goes up to Illinois. Mom and I are staying in Memphis. After a couple months, my dad called up and said, pack up the kid and come up here. So we did. We went up to Illinois. He did the last couple months of his training, and then we literally sailed to France. Dad's next assignment was in France. We drove our '56 Plymouth, my mom, Dad, and I, our dog, to the coast, got the car on the ship. It sailed with us to France. It was the SS America that we sailed on. And so Dad was starting his new assignment. What this assignment was going to be is with a particular aircraft, the RF-101 Voodoo. The F was for fighter, but the R was for reconnaissance. These were spy planes.
Okay.
My dad was going to work with spy planes. Okay, very interesting. One day during the summer, my dad took me to work. This was decades before take your daughter to work was something that people did. I go to work with him. in this very secure building, and I see all these aerial reconnaissance photos all over the wall. These are aerial reconnaissance photos. This is one of the Loire Valley, a castle there. That was not top secret. This is my dad. But I'm seeing all these pictures of these secret things. I don't make much of it. Again, I file them away in my little mind for a later time. Also, while we were in France, I got to go to boarding school. Kids all over Europe and other places. One of the kids I went to school with, his father worked in Moscow. My roommate, my senior year, her father was aide to the American ambassador in Tanzania, Africa.
Wow.
This was a very, very good school. I learned a great deal. And that was definitely my favorite place. But while I was in France, one of my best friends would always want me to tell her a story, so I would always make up some story. So I was always writing. Well, then after my dad's tour of duty there, we were shipped back to the States, but by then I was ready to start college, and I did.
Okay. Well, tell us about college.
Okay, my first year I went to Memphis State. It's now called University of Memphis. That summer, after I'd done my first year, I told my dad, Dad, my 2 years of high school were way better than what I was learning in college. I mean, I had a 99-point grade average in college. I said, this is too easy. Can I go somewhere else? Bless my dad's heart, he said I could go somewhere else. I went to Southwestern at Memphis. It's now called Rhodes College. 2 Supreme Court justices graduated from that college, and a lot of other people. Okay, so I start my sophomore year. That was 1968. They call 1968 the year that changed the world. First thing, they had the Prague Spring in Czechoslovakia. Half of my ancestors are Czechoslovakian, so I'm paying attention to what's going on. Then the North Koreans captured one of our ships, the SS Pueblo. They had the Tet Offensive in Vietnam, the failed Paris peace talks. Yasser Arafat came to power, Saddam Hussein came to power. Martin Luther King was assassinated in Memphis while I lived there.
Wow.
Bobby Kennedy was killed out in California. I'm sitting in a classroom saying, you know what? I don't want to be here anymore. So that summer I tell my dad, nope, I'm going to go out and get another job. I'm going to get a job.
Okay, and what kind of job did you get after your second year?
The first job I got was at a newspaper. It was called the Whitehaven Star. Get this? It was a small weekly paper. The people that happened to own this paper owned like 5 different small papers all over the Mid-South. They would write the editorials and the big news articles. What the reporters would do would write the little human interest things and the cute stuff. Mm-hmm. I was writing, I did get the job on the paper, so I was writing about school principals in the local schools and various little things like that. One day, the coach of the local high school came in and was telling me about he was giving me the football scores, because I would post them. He was telling me about what was going on in high schools that time. He was saying everybody was using drugs. Man, I never smoked a cigarette, much less used a drug. So I'm thinking, I don't want to just sit here and write about this stuff. I want to go and do something. So I quit the paper. I go down to the Memphis Police Department, try to get a job. That was not the time of year they did recruiting. I go to the Sheriff's Department. You had to be 25 to be a sheriff, to join the Sheriff's Department. Okay. I was only 21. My dad told me to go down to the FBI bureau in Memphis. My dad knew the head of the FBI in Memphis for some reason that was never explained. I go down there, and for some reason, the FBI has to check out your background to make sure you're not an international terrorist or on the 10 most wanted. It took them months before they got to me. I got my letter from J. Edgar Hoover.
There you go.
I was accepted, but before I got the job, I was looking through the big paper in Memphis, the Memphis Commercial Appeal, and I saw a want ad for a private detective firm. So I go down to the private detective firm, and I'm interviewed by a guy named Mr. McGraw. He liked the fact that my dad had been in the military, and I traveled a lot because he said working as an undercover agent, which was what I was going to be doing, I would have to travel a lot. So I got the job at the private detective agency. It was with Mark Lippman Incorporated. Mr. Lippman even wrote a book about cases like what I did, none of mine, but this is what he did.
All right.
So I started my job as a private detective.
Okay. Tell us the roles that you fulfilled as an undercover agent.
Okay. Roles is actually a good word. When I hired on at the place, Mr. McGraw liked the fact that I was a writer and also that I did plays, because he said you have to assume characters when you go undercover, because you can't walk into a place and say, well, I'm a private eye, tell me everything. People will not tell you diddly.
Yeah.
So I would assume a character, something very simple, so I could talk to the people that I was watching. Because in a lot of places there's stealing. There's a lot of stealing going on. And so that's what I was doing undercover. One of the cases that I got was at a cosmetics factory in Chicago, and they were losing thousands of dollars worth of product. So they needed somebody to go there, work undercover. I get the job. I drive up to Chicago. I could not drive my car to work, so I had to take the subway. I worked at from 5 at night till 2 in the morning. Going home at 2 in the morning in Chicago was far scarier than me working undercover as a private eye, but I'm doing the job. First night I go in, what the job I was going to be doing was working on the assembly line, packaging the products. The conveyor belt would come down, you'd pick up the product. The first night we were doing mascara. Then they'd had this little machine that had the plastic bubble. You put the mascara on the table, on the little cardboard thing, drop down the plastic bubble, it would heat seal it, you'd pick it up, put it on the conveyor belt. Again, all night I'm doing
all night
this.
long.
But while I'm doing this, I'm talking to one of the ladies that I was working with. And in the middle of the night there while we were working, she handed me a handful of the mascara and I think some eyeshadow. And I did not carry a purse with me because I thought somebody on the subway would steal it. So it was winter, and so I carried my ID in my boots. Well, she told me to stick all this stolen stuff in my boots, which I did because I have to go along with everything. Yeah. And then she pointed out that a lot of the women would come in at 5 o'clock when they're starting their job with a shopping bag with shoe boxes, empty shoe boxes, set it down next to their workstation, and just fill it up with stuff. They were doing this night after night after night. My first night on the job, okay, I see what's going on. This was February of 1969 back then. There were no cell phones. The little rooming house thing I lived in, I didn't have a phone. I would have to write up my report nightly, mail it down to Memphis. They'd get it, see what's going on. Okay, now everybody knows what's happening. What are they going to do? I stay there for a couple weeks to see if there's any other way they're stealing. Then one night I come back to work. The boss comes in and says, we have put lockers up for all you nice ladies so you can hang your winter coat and put your boots in there and your shopping bags. That pretty well cut out all the stealing. I stayed a week, a little more than a week more, to see if they were going to find other ways. No, they weren't. So I could quit and say, oh, I have a job elsewhere, and I went on my merry way. I ended up doing several different assignments, one in Atlanta, Little Rock. I had a job in a small place in Kentucky. There were 3 murders while I was there. Had nothing to do with my case, but what a hairy little town that was. But by that summer, I thought, you know what? I think I might want to go back to college. I asked my dad. My mom and dad were very glad to get me to come home. So I told the detective agency, sorry, I need to quit. So by the end of that summer, I had reapplied to Southwestern, and in the fall, I went back to college. I did my last 2 years, graduated, and then I worked 1 more year at a small company that made we did circuit diagrams for the phone company. I was a draftsman. That was nice. I worked a year, and then I thought, it's time for me to really go out on my own. I didn't know if I wanted to move to New York and write for Broadway or move to Hollywood and write for the movies. Me and like 5 million other people that would be going to Hollywood, but didn't know what to do. There was another lady draftsman with me. All the rest were men draftsmen. This was wonderful to me to work with all these young guys. Here I was 24 years old. I loved it.
There you go.
But I needed to go somewhere else. I was telling this older woman that I didn't know which place I wanted to go. She said, oh, you don't want to go to New York because it's cold and crowded. Unless you were born there, you're not going to know how to live there. So I decided, okay, I guess I'll go to California. I packed up my Volkswagen and a few things. I did not take any furniture. My parents had already given me enough. I didn't need anything else. And I drive to California. I found a little duplex apartment in Glendale, California. I brought with me a little piece of foam that I slept on until I finally got a used bedroom set from a thrift store, and I started my life in California.
So what jobs did you get there?
Oh, okay. There were many jobs in California. First thing I do is go to a job agency to try to find something. They tell me I'm overqualified because I have a college degree. Well, I still have to eat, I still have to pay my rent, I have to pay my car insurance, my health insurance. You know, am I overqualified for that? So I had to find myself a job. First job I found was in a beer tavern in Burbank, California. I would draw beer. I could draw a beer with a small head or a thick foam head. It took me like 5 minutes to learn how to do that. I did that job 2 nights. The last night I was there, my car was parked at the back of the bar. The owner would come to get his money at the end of the day. He was parked in front. Well, I go out the back, and there's some guy that had been at the bar bothering me all night. He was around my car. I get in my car. He wouldn't leave me alone. The man that owned the bar had driven by the alley. He saw what was going on. He calls the police. 2 squad cars come around. They haul this guy off. I go home. Next day, I call the bar and say, I'm sorry, I don't think this is my thing. So had to get another job. Next one was as a car hop at a drive-in. I mean, I learned how to carry the trays here. That job lasted 5 days. This was a well-known drive-in place, but they had a policy that they had to know how much you pay or you got in tips, and they would deduct it from your minimum wage payment. I didn't think that was fair.
No.
So again, I quit. Now I had to find another job. Well, I'm looking in the want ads. I see something in the classified ads. A couple guys in Hollywood are going to teach classes in all things Hollywood. This would be acting, writing, producing, all this. I go down and talk to them. I paid a couple $100. That was a lot for me in the 70s. Go down there, talk to them, and sign up for this. I wait a couple weeks. The one man calls me back and he says, well, his partner kind of frittered the money away. They really aren't getting this thing off the ground. But would I like to work for him and his wife as nanny and housekeeper to his 4 kids? I thought, okay, I need a job, so I'm going to work for him. I found another older couple that needed a housekeeper. I worked for them, so now I had 5 days a week I'm working. The man that I was working for, he was a talent agent. One of his clients was Agnes Moorehead. She was one of the biggest stars in Hollywood. She and Orson Welles were in all of Orson Welles' movies. She was starred in Citizen Kane. She was big. I didn't get to meet her, but one of the other clients the guy had was James MacArthur. He co-starred in the original version of Hawaii Five-0.
Okay.
One day, James flies into California. They really shot the movie over in Hawaii. He flies into California. He had left his car in the people I worked for, their barn. Now these people, they had a great big house overlooking Los Angeles. The swimming pool was up on a hill. The barn was down here. This was a big thing. So James goes to get in his car. The battery's dead. So I hand him the keys of my Volkswagen. So he drives to get himself a battery. So I actually had a movie star drive my car.
There you go.
Okay, I thought that was great. Okay, now the man I was working for knew that I wanted to learn how to write for the movies. He got me in an acting class because I thought this would be a great way for me to see what does an actor need from a writer. So I'm taking an acting class. The first one was done by a man named Bruce Glover. Bruce Glover was an actor as well as one of the biggest acting coaches in Hollywood. The one movie I remember that he did was Diamonds Are Forever with Sean Connery. He and another guy were the diabolically funny guys in that movie, Diamonds Are Forever. So Bruce is teaching us acting, because there were a lot of us in the class. The one thing he taught us was something that's based on something very normal in Hollywood. There are no small parts, only small actors. So he said, even if you get a bit part, do something to make it important.
Yeah.
If you're the girl, twirl your hair or do some little movement to make the camera want to zoom in on you. I learned that, so now when I'm writing a character, if he's going to come on the page, I want that character to do something, so there's some reason for him to be there. That was very, very good for me to learn. A little while later, the guy I worked for said there was another guy just starting up an acting class, and he said this one might be really good for me too. This one had Rudy Solari and Guy Stockwell. Rudy Solari he guest starred in every TV series for 20 years, but he also started the Solari Theater. That was a live action theater in Los Angeles. All the big stars went there. But Rudy was starting to teach these classes. He had me do something, he had all of us do something. When you're doing a character in the movies or on stage, you know what the dialogue is because it's in the script. The director is going to tell you maybe how to say the dialogue. But what Rudy wanted us to do was learn who is your character by writing a biography of your character. You have to make it up because it's not in the script.
Okay.
But think about who this person is so you know the reason why he's doing something. I've done that for every character I've written in all 28 books that I have because that was gold for me.
Uh-huh.
I thought that was marvelous. Okay, I worked as the nanny and the housekeeper. I did that for like 9 months. And then I figured, I think I need something a little more stable. Yeah. So I quit that job, and actually I don't remember where am I going from here. I quit the job, and I got a job for a company that was doing a business conference for different businesses all over the United States. This little company made industrial clamps and also industrial cases that very delicate equipment goes in. A couple of those cases literally went to the moon because they were special made for things that needed protection. So I'm working with them to get this conference going. We did it in a big hotel in Pasadena. Took a couple months to get the thing going. It was really nice, had fun. After the conference was over, I worked for the ad man in the morning. I'd work on the switchboard in the afternoon, and I did that for a year. Yeah, wasn't the most exciting thing, but one of the men that I worked with there knew that there was a job opening at a store in the foothills above where I lived in Glendale. So I drive up to the store. It was called Miniature World. It was one of the first miniature stores in the entire country. What Kay Kelly had was not only the shop that had the doll houses and doll furniture, but an elderly lady that she knew and the woman's sister who had passed away had doll houses. We set them up in a museum in the back of the store, so we had not only the shop, but we had a miniature museum back there. The other thing that Kay had was a Christmas room. She really liked the holidays. That's probably why I have 2,000 Santas now in my collection.
I see.
But we would set up this one room for the holidays. But there were also Christmas cards. One time I see this Christmas card that has a polar bear with a Santa Claus hat. And I got the idea, what if, in fact, what if are the two biggest words all writers need to know, because you'll get an idea and you need to take it somewhere. You say, okay, what if? My what if this polar bear works for Santa Claus at the North Pole? I wrote out a rough idea of what I wanted the story to be, and then this is the drawing, and this was a couple of the characters that I might want in it. I drew that. Well, it took years for me to come up with, completely write the story, but then I decided I better build the castle too. So I built the castle, made some of the characters. Here are more of them. I made the Santa Clauses because I had a lot of ideas for the stories. End up doing 3 of the Christmas stories because I really like Santa Claus. But I got all that from working at Miniature World. After 5 years, Kay decided to retire. She closed her store. Her and her husband moved to Florida. Now I needed to go and get myself another job. The first one, since I'd worked in a store for all these years, I could get a manager job at a store or assistant manager. I go down to the Glendale Galleria, get a job as assistant manager at a card store. About 6 months later, I noticed that Walden Books had an assistant manager job. I go down there, I get that job. Now, because I wanted to be around books. And I think that was a really good thing because just being around hundreds and hundreds of books started getting me to write something. So I'm working at the bookstore for a year and a half, and there was a lady that worked there. She sold encyclopedias. We put a table and chair out front for her so she could sell them. She was telling me one day that she saw that there was a job at a bank in Pasadena, and it was securities. She thought that was a security guard, and that if I take the job, I'd be carrying a gun since I was a private detective. Well, when I was a private detective, I didn't carry a gun. I carried a knife, but I didn't carry a gun. But I thought, well, let me see. Maybe working at something like a bank, a little more stable. I go down to the bank, and I managed to get the job. And I'm going to be dealing with securities. So.
Okay. So how long did you keep that up?
Oh God, that was a 10-year gig. But I start the job at the bank. There are 3 ways a bank can lose money. Bank robber comes in, robs the bank. Somebody in the bank can embezzle money. Yes, that happens also.
Yeah.
The third way is if you have the job that I have in charge of securities, which is stocks and bonds, not carrying a gun. If there is a purchase offer for stock that our customers hold, because we held stocks, physical stocks for our customers, and I see in the Wall Street Journal, I read that every day, that there is an offer by a company to buy shares that we happen to hold. I send out a notice to our customers saying that this company wants to buy your stuff for, say, $100 a share. I need your answer by this date. I package up all the stuff, send it to the offer, we get our money, I pay the clients. If I fail to get the shares there on time, the bank can lose thousands and thousands of dollars. I never lost a dime. I really enjoyed it.
Good for you.
The lady that hired me said the job was like working at a circus where you're spinning the plates on the little poles.
Yeah.
Because, boy, you got to keep those plates spinning. If one of them crashes, you're out. But I never dropped a plate.
That's beat the clock.
Yes. So I worked there for like 6 years, and one day I go into our area. You have to use a card key to get in there because it was very secure. So I come in, and I noticed that the assistant vice president, she was over me, there's somebody in her cubicle, and I see a pair of cowboy boots and a pair of blue jeans, and I look over and I see he's a good-looking guy. That was kind of neat. A little while later, she brings him over. I'm now going to be training him and another woman to work in this area. Well, I ended up training him, and I ended up marrying him.
I see.
That was wonderful. That's why, if you want to talk about the best job I ever had, yeah,
that's it.
Marrying Richard was the best job.
Okay.
Well, but before we got married, we were just dating. The bank has this policy that you can't marry somebody at the bank. Well, there were 2 other couples that were married and worked there, but we didn't get that advantage. Okay, now one of us has to leave. Well, I'd been there 6 years, and after 10 years, you can retire eventually with a pension. So Richard, the gallant knight that he was, said, he was going to go and find another job. He did at an investment firm, making more money than I was making. I'd been there 6 years. He goes and gets this better job, but good. That New Year's Eve, Richard and I got married. We stayed married for 33 years till Richard passed away. But he gets that job. That's marvelous. 2 years later, our biggest customer at the bank wanted me to start working for them because I was doing a lot of stuff for her, and they were our biggest customer. But we had a rule that you're not allowed to hire each other's employees, your customers. Can't do that. So I said, well, call Richard. She calls him. He gets the job. 2 years later, he's making 3 times what I'm making. He says, honey, retire and write your books. He had promised me that before we got married, that he would make that happen, and he did.
Wonderful.
So at 44 years old, I retired to write.
There you go. What led to your first book?
This was interesting. When I worked at that card shop for just 6 months, a young lady had just moved to California from New York. She said that she had read an article in New York paper about a police officer doing the beat at night on the wharf in New York. He's walking down the street and he hears something down a dark alley. He figures it's some guy going through the garbage cans. That was back when they had metal garbage cans and they made all that noise. Well, he goes down the alley and it wasn't a man. He thinks, oh, it must be a dog. Gets closer. Wasn't a dog. He shoots it. They call the hazmat team. They carry this thing in. The newspaper article says it was a rat, a 105-pound rat. It had to be a capybara because they do get to be that size.
Right.
But the article said rat. I have one of my what if moments. What if it's a rat and I move it and its family to Chicago? Remember, I worked at Chicago in the winter.
Sure.
And so the rats are carving out caverns underneath those big, expensive high-rises on Lakeshore Drive. And one of them's just ready to fall. So I write that story, or I start writing the story. But that was Caverns, though it took me a lot longer to get it published. But I wrote it. Okay. So that was the first
what
one.
if?
Yes, that's how what if happens.
Were you the inspiration for the first female private detective?
Yes. Actually, I need to say something else. Yes, I forgot where I was. After I wrote Caverns, and I'm now retired, I'm thinking I need to write something else. And I thought maybe I'll write a spy novel kind of based on things I just guessed that my dad did. Because I remember that sugarcane. I knew about the Cuban Missile Crisis and the stuff going on in Cuba. So I thought, okay, I'm going to say that my dad somehow went to Cuba and he was flying the spy planes. Okay, I know all this. I start writing my spy novel. I have it start in World War II, but do the Cuban Missile Crisis and the Bay of Pigs.
Right.
And so I finished the first draft. I send it to my father. He sends me back 12 pages of notes saying, well, no, this is what I would do here, this is what I would do here, this is what I would do here. So I amended my story, finished it, tried to get it published, couldn't do it. So I thought, okay, maybe if I do 2 books and I could sell it to a publisher as, twin books, that might work. The second one was going to be based on the fact I'd been at that boarding school. I know that a lot of children of people that are in the military, they join the military too. So I thought, what if some of the guys I went to the boarding school with were recruited by like the CIA or Black Ops organizations during like the Vietnam War. So I'm starting to write my story. This was the same time that we were going to have our 30th high school reunion. Now the school in France closed. I mean, Charles de Gaulle kicked out all the Americans a couple years after my dad moved out of France, because de Gaulle for some reason didn't want us there. Okay, so we weren't going to have the reunion in France. They decided we'd have it in Las Vegas, because all the kids that went to that boarding school, we were from all over the country anyway. Just we were all stationed there together. So we're going to have it in Las Vegas. Richard and I drive up to the hotel. One night, I'm sitting around the table at dinner talking to the guys that I went to high school with, and I'm telling them about my book, about the guys at the dorm were recruited by the CIA. One of the guys I went to school with leaned over me and said, "Honey, you didn't make that up. That's exactly what he did and two other guys I went to school with." Oh, so I still made up my story, but I obviously based it on some fact. But I couldn't get that one sold. I said, okay, maybe a third one. I decided to write about the Cold War, communism, and Hollywood. Wrote third one. 10 years I'm writing all these books, and I'm not getting them published at all. Then Richard came to me and said these immortal words, "Honey, you used to be a private detective. Why don't you write a detective novel?" That's when I wrote that first Jen Caulfield book, and I got it published. So.
Okay, that's great. You joined a few...
But this is where your question is about, did I base that?
Yes.
I did. My Ginger Caulfield, private detective, has two things that we have in common. She was a retired private eye. Okay. I was a retired private eye. And then she got a jury duty summons to go be on a jury. At that time I was writing the story, both Richard and I got jury duty summons. In fact, this is mine, my jury duty summons. But Richard gets to go down there first. He goes downtown Los Angeles the same day the O.J. Simpson jurors are called. He was not on the jury, he was not called for that jury, but he comes home that evening and tells me about all the news copters and the news vans and the cameras and the microphones.
A lot of attention.
He said it was a media circus down there. I thought, what if? And the next thing you know, I get jury duty summons. I go down and I get on a jury, and I think, okay, I'm going to have a retired female private detective get on a jury. There's going to be some dead bodies, and I write the first and second and third of the Ginger Caulfield ones. Actually, the second and third, the second one was based on the fact we got free tickets to a racetrack near us.
Okay.
And the third one was a friend of mine was a reporter, and she was doing a story on them retrofitting a dam in kind of back behind us in the foothills. So I got 3 books based on things that I saw or did. So that's how I started off with the Jen Caulfield books. So.
Well, that's interesting. You joined a few mystery writer groups. Tell us about that.
Yeah, after I published the first Media Justice, that first book, I thought I really ought to join mystery writers groups to kind of see, okay, now what do I do next? Because I had absolutely no idea. Mm-hmm. So I joined both Sisters in Crime Los Angeles and Mystery Writers of America. Sisters in Crime is actually the larger mystery writers group, and the LA chapter is by far the biggest. So I joined them, went to the meetings, and got to know a lot of the writers. This is when I noticed that a lot of the writers wrote short stories. I had never written a short story before. I might write little plays, but never a short story per se. So I decided to write a story, and I came up with a private detective, and this is where I used the thing that Rudy Solari said, come up with a biography of your character.
Right.
Okay, the first thing I could think about Johnny Casino, who was my character, was that he was a retired PI with a past, and he just hopes his past doesn't catch up with him. So that's kind of what I wanted Johnny to be. I write a short story. I sent it off to one of the last mystery writer magazines out there, didn't get it sold. They were just all disappearing. But I wrote a second Johnny Casino and didn't have any luck with that. That's when Sisters in Crime announced that they were doing their anthology. They do one every other year. They will give you a theme and tell the people that belong to the group, you write your story, submit it, and if it fits, they'll publish it. That year's theme was going to be landmarks in Los Angeles. Well, I'm thinking, okay, everybody's going to use the Hollywood sign, so I wasn't going to use that. Actually, I don't think anybody did. But it happened to be my birthday, and Richard called me and wanted me to come downtown and have lunch with him. So I go downtown, and we go to the Bonaventure Hotel. That's that big, gorgeous glass hotel in downtown LA. When you walk in the lobby, it's like 3 stories high. There's a glass ceiling. When you get on the elevator, you go up through the glass ceiling, and then you're riding on the outside of the building looking over LA. I thought, this is the perfect place for a body. So I write my story, and I got in it. In fact, the book's Landmark for Murder, they even put the Bonaventure and 2 other landmarks on the cover because that was a known landmark. So I've written my stories. I wrote one more Johnny Casino, and I just didn't know what to do with it. But that's when I met Ray Bradbury.
Oh, okay. Well, tell us
Okay.
about the famous writer.
Yes, absolutely. My friend who was a newspaper reporter, she worked at a small paper like I used to do back in Memphis. She would do local stories and stuff, but she also got tickets to opening night at a variety of small theaters in and around LA, in Glendale, Pasadena, the Sierra Madre Theater. But because it was Los Angeles, they had a lot of actors that would be in these plays, so they were very nice. But we got free tickets. She got to bring a guest. I got to be guest.
Okay.
But the fact that I got to go free, I thought maybe I should try writing a review too. And I had contacted a place called the American Chronicle online, and I signed up to be able to post articles. So Jackie and I go to a couple plays. Then at Christmas time, we go to see Noel that Ray Bradbury had written. I mean, he did Fahrenheit 451, all kinds of very famous books. So that night, opening night, Ray goes up on the stage and he talks to the audience. He was talking about when he first started writing. He had a whole bunch of short stories. He writes science fiction, and he didn't know what to do with them. He had dinner that night with an editor. The editor told him, well, link all the stories together. He did. That's how they produced The Martian Chronicles, which is one of the biggest books ever written in the United States. So I'm listening to Ray Bradbury talk about that, and I think, well, I've got all these Johnny Casino things. That's definitely a link. So I write a whole bunch of them, and I publish the Johnny Casino book, the first Johnny Casino. The next time we went to one of the plays, it was Fahrenheit 451. Ray not only had, someone did it as a movie, but he also wrote it as a play. I went to see Jackie and I went to see the play. After the play, Mr. Bradbury would be out in the lobby and talking to us. So I went over to him, told him that I had taken his advice the last time I did his play and wrote my Johnny Casino things. I also told him that I reviewed his stuff. He gave me his email and said I could send him a copy of that book. Now, the email was actually his daughter, Alexandra, because Ray Bradbury never used a computer. He typed everything on a manual typewriter. But I would send my reviews to Alexandra, and I did send my book to him, and I'd sent him one book that had one of my short stories. He even emailed me back mentioning that he had read it. Okay, that was neat. A couple years later, I wrote a collection of short stories that I dedicated to Ray Bradbury. And I contacted his daughter, said I would like to send it to your dad. She emailed me back and said her father had gone blind. He would not be able to read it. 2 months later, on June 5th, 2012, Ray Bradbury passed away. But he was a very great man.
Wow, wow. You also teach classes in writing, and how did that come about?
When I joined Sisters in Crime, I ended up being their Speakers Bureau director. I did 80 events all around Los Angeles with our writers. I would organize them at libraries, women's clubs, different venues to get our writers out in front of an audience. Something I kind of noticed right away, some of those people were, especially if they just started writing, they were a little nervous about getting up in front of people. So I had a class on being able to talk to people. Since I'd taken that acting class, I'd learned a lot, did that. But we also had people that had joined the club that were just brand new writers. They hadn't published anything, but they might need a little boost in how to write. So I thought, maybe I'll teach a class in beginning writing. So the board said, yeah, they thought that would be a good idea. So now I had to come up with a game plan. Thought, oh, okay, what am I going to write about? That's when I remembered taking a philosophy class back in college about Aristotle. I wasn't majoring in philosophy, but I wanted to take this class, even though it was for people that were going to be philosophy teachers. But I asked the professor, and he said, yes, I could take the class. We read the Poetics that Aristotle wrote. In that, he's talking about there are 5 basic elements to a story: plot, character, dialogue, setting, and the meaning of the story. Now, Aristotle, two wise men. Aristotle said that plot is definitely the most important. I agree, because if you don't have a plot to the story, your characters are walking around aimlessly. So I write out like a 12-page handout, and I teach this class several different times through Sisters in Crime. I thought it was good. I know it helped people. A couple years later, I thought, maybe I should turn it into a book. So I added some more stories in there, advice, put some of my short stories in the back, and came up with the Anatomy of a Short Story workbook. This is actually my bestseller. I sell more of this than anything else. People will buy it like a dozen books at a time. They're teaching good. That's what I wanted. I want people to write more so people will read more. So yes, that was very, very good.
Okay. What do you tell an aspiring writer?
That's actually interesting. When I worked at the bank, I had already finished the Caverns, the one about the rats, and I'd started one of the spy books. One of the men I worked with knew I was a writer, and he had been talking to some other guy that worked in another area that was a writer, and he wanted to talk to me. So, okay, I talked to him over lunch. And the guy comes in and says, yes, he's a writer. And I said, well, what have you written? Nothing. He had not written anything. Well, you're not a writer until you write something yet. So I explained to him that he really needs to write something, an idea, a plot line, something, because other than that, you really aren't a writer. Something I mentioned to a lot of people, most all writers I know have a drawer or files full of little bits and pieces of things that they've written, ideas, and they'll call on them later for a story. When I was a junior in high school, my English teacher back at that boarding school wanted us to all start writing a novel. So at the last 15 minutes of every class day, he would have us sit down, write our novel. So for a couple months, I worked on this thing. I had like 5 pages. It was the opening of a book, and I knew that this was a good opening, but I didn't know where my character was. 50 years later, I pick up those 5 pages from high school, and I say, I now know who this guy is. That opening is the beginning of my 3 Chance McCoy mystery things. That was the beginning of that series, because I saved all those things. But I try to get people to write, because that is important. Whether it's just a rough idea, maybe a short story. The short story might turn into a novel, or you might do a book of short stories. But I would like people to write something else. I would like people to write their autobiography, because everybody has a story to tell. I don't have a hometown. I didn't live any place long enough. So people that get to live in a their hometown and watch it grow or part of that, I don't have that, but they are. Write your story. They might even have friends who would like to know more about them. Write your story. You definitely have family, grandchildren that might want to know who you are and where they came from. And there's one other person that might want to know who you are, and that's you, because you write out your biography and you'll see how you came to be who you are. I have 40 scrapbooks in my basement of everything I've done through my life.
Wow.
A couple years ago, I put them all together and wrote an autobiography. As I say, it only took me 75 years to write it, but I did. But we all need to do that.
I see. Well, that's wonderful. You self-publish. Do self-published authors have a lower status than regularly published authors?
If a person sees a book in a bookstore, one's self-published, one's regularly published, they're not going to know.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
But the big publishing houses have a lot more money to publicize their books. They can also get the books in bookstores all across the country. Sorry, self-published people can't do that. The advertising alone is prohibitive. We're not going to be able to do that. But what I did, I joined the writers' groups. I went all to the writers' conferences. I was out in front of people. I did the 80 events when I was with Sisters in Crime. I only put myself on 3 of them because you're not supposed to push yourself. I'm sorry, that's not supposed to be done. But I introduced everybody on the panel so people knew who I was. Some people would hear about me by word of mouth, different groups, and they would invite me to speak to them, which I would do. That was very good. But at least I would get people out there to read my stuff and maybe to write, because I think that was extremely important. There's a quote by, what was I forgetting? No. There's a quote by Ray Bradbury. Actually, here's a picture of me and Ray.
Oh, okay.
I actually love this picture. But he said this: "You don't have to burn books to destroy a culture. Just get people to stop reading." That's why I write, because I don't want books to be destroyed.
Understand. What are your future plans?
I still write. I am working on a book now that I call Bits and Pieces. And honest to God, I am using those little bits that I have in all these folders to write stories.
Put them all together.
So why not? Because it gives me something to do. But that is what I'm working on right now.
Do you have a list of books that the viewers can take a look at with your different characters?
Yes, I do. Because I have 3 different detective series, Christmas books, some standalone books, some short story books, yes.
Okay. Do you have a website? And these books are available on Amazon?
Yeah, they're all available on Amazon. Some of them are both e-books and trade paperback. So some of them are in both things. But my website is gbpool.com, because I found, since I don't write cozies, fluffy little things, I write really detective things. I didn't want somebody to think it was a woman writer and it might be a cutesy thing, so I write under GB Pool, and that works fine.
Okay. In summary, what makes sense to you and what doesn't? I ask that of every interviewee.
Okay. What makes sense to me is something I can understand based on how I was raised, my education, the events that have happened in my life. And if I find later on that I've learned something new, I might say that, oh, maybe that doesn't make sense. I will change my mind. But I figure the best thing to do, keep learning something, so I always know what's common sense good.
Okay. It's wonderful to have you on and to hear of all your experiences. Thank you very much for appearing.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. Please let us know, give us some comments, feedback on the show. And if you would like to appear, please get in touch with me. My email address will appear at the bottom of the screen. And if you know an interesting person who you think might want to appear, please get us their contact information and we'll take it from there. And remember, seatbelts save lives.